So here we roll into turn 1, starting off with the Sand Nation. Got that early desert sitting right in front of him. There's no way he doesn't take it because it's going to allow his general to move more than one tile this turn. Pretty huge. He could acquire more than one tile in the opening turn. Let's see what he does. Here you have the Sand player opening up by, of course, purchasing that desert tile directly adjacent to his capital. No-brainer move. But then it's where is his general going to go after that? Because he can move through deserts and not count as his movement for one turn, allowing him to purchase more than one tile per turn, in turn 1. Not something that a lot of nations can do economically. And look what he does. Very quickly learning. Remember, this is the first time that Sand has actually been played in a game. He begins by putting the barracks on the desert, but then realizes that if he puts it on his capital, his soldiers moving from his capital can move through this desert anyway. It would be an absolute waste to put barracks on this desert right here in this current point. So he builds a barracks, putting him to 10 and 4, then purchases a soldier and goes to that lake, putting him to 7 and 4. And I think this positioning in turn 1 is very interesting. Usually what most players, especially most turtling nations, are going to do is you're going to spread out an equal amount of tiles in your opening turns so as to be able to cover up any, aggression coming at you from any direction. But he is opting to go for this lake on the coast because it appears he's going for that desert in turn 2, and that's only a few tiles away from the Poison Nation. I think this is early aggression being shown from what should be a turtling nation. But let's see. So he doesn't purchase this lake that his soldier is on. He purchases the lake on the coastal tile. I think this is a much more, this is a more turtling play, and I do think it's the correct play here, which puts him to 2 and 2. Opening up with 2 tiles to give him food and 1 tile that gives him a small amount of building materials. Very, very strong opener for the Sand Nation. I think pretty optimal. Now we go to the Poison's first turn ever broadcasted. Will they disrupt from the get-go? Probably not. Poison, I think a fairly straightforward turn here. What I would do is, I'm just trying to get to that rainforest turn 2. I think he should move his general to the field and then go to the rainforest, or forest and then rainforest. It doesn't really matter what he does here. But taking the mountain is not bad, of course. Building materials is delicious. He moves his general to the field, purchases the field, bringing him to 5 and 8. Buys a barracks on his home tile, putting him to 5 and 5. If he buys a soldier, he can also buy the mountain, which is what he does. We did have a request at this table. This is the patented Zach Nara turn 1 opener. The patented Zach Nara opener. Very, very strong. You're giving yourself a strong food provider and a strong building material provider while also getting the first soldiers on the board. Absolutely huge. And it brings him to 0 and 0 on the turn, maximizing the efficiency. And that's why it's called the Zach Nara opener. Now it goes to me, the Earth player. I think this play is, very cut and dry. We haven't seen what direction lightning is moving yet. I think you obviously go to the mountain to, capitalize on those extra resources that you gain from it. No need to push anything else here. I'm going to try to utilize all my building materials, which is what Earth benefits from the most in these early stages. So we're going to go ahead and build a mine on that mountain, doubling the resource production, resulting in 6 building materials produced from this tile alone because of my Earth passive. Now we go to the Lightning player, turn 1. Pretty fast moving here. As we said, all these players have played multiple games, and so pretty quick from the get-go. Moves to the lake, purchases it for 5 and 2, putting him to 5 and 8. And because he doesn't need a barracks on his capital tile, he could construct a soldier and also get that mountain, which is a very, very strong play. One might call it the Zach Nara opener, but for cheaper. So he builds that soldier, moves to the mountain, and claims that as well, bringing him to 0 and 3. He could also get a building here. This is the power of lightning in the opener. Absolutely huge, and he's doing it incredibly well. Like I said, only his 3rd game played, but the man has come with a strategy here, putting him to 0 and 0. All in all, fairly standard openers here. We've got 2 players maximizing the efficiency of the resources. So here's our updated resource totals going into turn 2. We can see that everyone pretty balanced here. Those that utilize all of their resources obviously going to be lower than everyone else, but they're going to be better in the next turn. That being said, I'm one advantage a card away from, this conservative play from just absolutely crippling my early game, making me a very vulnerable target in the first few turns. So we'll see how it plays out, and we get to our first weather event. The winter is coming. Weather card is enacted turn 1, which does slow the pace of the early stages of the game. As a more turtley player, Earth and Sand are definitely experiencing some kind of benefit from this, whereas your more aggressive nations, Poison and Lightning, are being hurt by this. Winter is coming, cuts all food production from all of your tiles in half. Yikers. We go to the Sand player for turn 2. Sand buying this lake and then saying he's going to go ahead and activate his tier 1 ability that is going to convert an own tile to a desert, creating a chain of 3 deserts here. Pretty huge. Essentially behaving like a river for the Water Nation. He can now move from his capital to this forest or this lake tile with any soldier he produces from that barracks. Absolutely huge. Bringing him to 4 and 4 as he started at 9 and 6 at the round, converts it to a desert, and now he's got 3 consecutive desert tiles where he could go to this forest or this lake, just 2 tiles away from the Poison capital with any soldiers he's generating on this capital tile. Pretty huge, and was only possible because of these 2 desert tiles that he started with. This is a fairly rare corner of the board to ever be generated by this map, and it's perfect for the Sand player to capitalize on. And he purchases that 3rd consecutive desert tile. This is not only supplementing his resources, but it's also supplementing his defenses. Remember that each desert tile owned is adding 1 to each of his soldiers' dice roll when defending, only forcing the Poison player to work a little bit harder to thwart any attack that's coming his direction. His general takes advantage of moving through the deserts, joins his other soldier at the front line. With 4 food left, he purchases 1 last soldier, bringing him to 1 and 1, a very efficient turn, and he's already providing a decent threat on the Poison player here, just in turn 2. A much more aggressive game than we saw in our last recording. Once again, this is a defensive nation doing this. Wow. Poison player has to work up some kind of defenses here. Fairly low in the resources, though, because of his really expensive turn 1. Going to move his general to the forest and purchase that, bringing him to 2 and 2. And then he's going to activate his tier 1 ability, Watch Your Step, which is going to convert that to a swamp tile. Let's see if there's something else he could have done here, if he does anything else with the rest of his turn. So we see that he then shifts his soldier from the mountain to the swamp, and at this point, with sitting at 2 and 2, unless he's got some kind of advantage card in place, he's pretty much done buying anything for this turn. In my opinion, I do think he kind of blundered this turn here. He very early developed a swamp that I don't think he needed to, but what he also did was he surrendered another tile closer to his capital. Because what the desert player can now do, or the sand player can now do, is he could just keep going down this coastline, going into the lake. If I'm the swamp player, what I'm probably doing here is I'm spending the rest of my food moving this soldier that was on the mountain into the lake, purchasing it, and using those last 3 building materials to purchase a defensive fortification on it. What does this do? This forces the sand player to go inland, where I've got more options as a defender to jump on him in later turns. This is going to stall his aggression into my land, and then I can expand in other directions, potentially even surrounding him at this forest. If he's forced to make this forest his outpost, right, is it something that he can hold forever? We don't know. But I do think this is kind of a blundered play because it just surrenders another step that he can take into this land for free. Even if he buys a lake, yes, he can Sand player can purchase this forest in the following turn. But then we can purchase this forest with our general the following turn and then develop the swamp if we feel that it's necessary, or develop another defensive fortification. Sand does not have offensive bonuses in the tier 1 stage, and so it's very hard for him to go up against those defensive fortifications. So I do think this is an inefficient turn by the Poison player. And he ends his turn there. He doesn't have advantage cards to play. Earth player sitting at 11 and 11 here. Goes to the lake, purchases the lake, going to 6 and 9 on my resources. Now have a building material producing tile and a food producing tile. Pretty solid, with the opportunity to purchase a rainforest in the following turn with his current standing. Here's what's lovely about this setup for a defensive turtling nation like myself. Yes, lightning can come at me, and which point all of this next couple of points are moot. But because of Sand's aggressive positioning on Poison, Poison doesn't have the opportunity to aggress upon me, which allows me to just build up defenses, build up resources, accelerate to tier 2 faster than other nations most likely, and stave off any attacks on me from the north, from the Lightning Nation, and then pounce on the mid game. Lightning player at 5 and 7 here moves the general onto the coastline, purchases that coastal lake, supplementing his food once again, and he's at 0 and 5. He goes ahead and pops the Rainy Day Fund, which is going to put 2 free resource buildings on those newly acquired lakes. So he doesn't suffer any building material losses here, so he still stays at 0 and 5, but he gets more food production at the end of this turn, which is showing that he wants to produce a lot of soldiers, but there is a limit to the longevity of this plan. You're paying upkeep on those buildings each turn after this turn, and he only has that mountain tile, which is totally fine. He needs to make sure that he's got enough resources to purchase this mountain and this rainforest in the next turn. I do think this is an early pop of the Rainy Day Fund, especially because you've got these two nations going at it. I don't necessarily need to surge with food in turn 2, because I'm probably not attacking for at least a couple more turns. So we have our updated resource totals here. Generated half as much food as we were supposed to this turn. Hence why, another reason why the early Rainy Day Fund wasn't as beneficial for him. He didn't generate as much food from it. Would have popped to 10 food that turn otherwise, where he could generate 3 more soldiers from his capital and provide a pretty big threat to anyone that he goes against. I'm not feeling a pressing need for food. I also have barely spent any this game, and I'm sitting at 10 and 17. I could go tier 2 next turn if I wanted to. And then we've got Poison and Sand, which have already had to invest in prematurely in soldiers. Right? Sand's strategy is clearly to be aggressive here, so he's invested in the manner that he wants to. But Poison, only being able to purchase 3 tiles in the first couple of turns, and it is already cornered, right? He's only built 1 tile out in each direction from his capital tile. Not a position that you want to be in. And so we go to turn 3, and let's see what the new weather event is. Continental Drift, you don't want to, as the Earth player, you don't want to see this played so early on because I have no plans of being aggressive. And also, no one's in a position to be aggressive with me. That being said, if Lightning were to try and develop something in the next couple of turns, he's not going to be able to attack me. Poison obviously has to direct their attention to this sand incursion coming at them. So this is a largely no impact weather event for the next couple of turns here. Wow, so the Sand Nation draws an announce card that forces another nation to send them 5 food. And here's where I do believe there's a mistake made here. He instinctively chooses me. On the opposite corner of the board, I am going to lose 5 food here. I go to 5 and 17, and he goes to 11 and 6 here. Whereas, if he removes food from the Poison player, basically can't expand. Can't train soldiers. He would go to 1 and 8. He can't purchase any tiles adjacent to him unless he is fortunate enough to draw some kind of food-generating advantage card. But he would absolutely cripple the nation that he's going at. And so this was a confusing play here. And I understand what his strategy is. He's trying to slow down the progression of the Earth Nation. He doesn't want me to go to tier 2. Maybe he thinks that's what I'm going to do. Another cool play here is if I'm going to expand over to going to tier 2, I can't even purchase this rainforest anymore, which is particularly frustrating as the Earth player here. But I do think this is a pretty big misplay here where he could just absolutely cripple the Poison Nation and just continue his onslaught. So let's see how it pans out. Sand goes aggressive here, purchases the forest, just 2 tiles away from the Poison Nation here. So he goes to 8 and 3 here. And he positions another soldier on this other forest. Let's see if he purchases it here. He does purchase it, putting him to 5 and 0. We'll talk about how this could be different. Where is he going to position his general? He could go to the lake, forcing the Poison player to, have to be aggressive in order to take a new tile. But he instead supplements the defenses on the forest. With 5 food, he can purchase 1 more soldier. He pops his It's Rough Tier 1 ability card, which is for every tile owned, he's going to gain a building material. And, you know, for it just being turn 3, he owns a lot of land. And he owns a lot of land that he probably shouldn't be able to own, but because of Poison backing themselves into a corner, he's getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 building materials from these tiles owned. Sorry, it doesn't include the capital, so just 6 building materials from that. So he goes to 5 and 6. So he can purchase a troop here. And I do like this move as well, but we want to talk about what else he could do on this front line here. So he purchases this soldier, which goes to 2 and 6, and then he's got enough resources. He can move his soldier through this desert into this mountain tile right here. He wants to supplement those building materials, putting him to 0 and 1, owning, yet again, more land. But let's talk about what he probably should have done. And this all goes back to that announce card at the beginning of his turn. If he takes away the food from the Poison Nation cannot train troops this turn feasibly. And then if he knows that he's going to, you know, get those extra building materials, what I would probably rather do is put a defensive fortification on this forest. Just 1 is all I need. And then maybe aggressively position my general on this lake right here. I can even purchase it. I don't have to buy this extra soldier, put it on the mountain. I can purchase this lake and put a defensive fortification there as well. And then what is the Poison player left with? They've got no food to purchase soldiers. They can't purchase any other tiles. They're out of the game, essentially. And so I do think this is a little bit of a blunder on turn 3 by the Sand Nation. But let's see how it plays out. Pretty balanced in resources, though. Like, it's... And maybe he's playing a more conservative approach here. Maybe if this attack, this aggression on the Poison Nation doesn't work, I've got resources to fall back on. That's totally valid. But what I'm seeing here is that the Poison player owns 3 tiles at turn 3. Not, you know, not the best for a nation that can be more aggressive here. But it's not the tiles owned, it's the positioning of the tiles. He is in a corner, and with no resources, but the potential to take away all of his resources, he wouldn't have been able to expand. Poison player activates Man-Made Plague. Once again, I think the most fun card that they have at their disposal, and this is going to halt any aggression anywhere on the board. It's one of the reasons why me as the Earth player, I haven't purchased soldiers yet, because I know that Plague is coming probably within the first few turns. Any soldiers that I purchase are just going to die a few turns later anyway. But this is going to halt aggression by the Sand player. Once again, this reinforces why I probably wanted defensive fortifications over soldiers. The structure's more important than the soldiers when going up against the Poison player here. So it's going to make the next weather event the Plague effect, and all players are going to experience double its effects. Poisoned at 6 and 8, though. He builds a barracks on the swamp. Trains 2 troops, putting him to 0 and 5. Activates his advantage card, Summoned Home, which sends the Sands General back home to whence he came from, which leaves just 1 lowly soldier on a forest with no defensive fortification. And with this swamp tile owned by the Poison Nation, he's going to add 1 onto his dice roll here when going into combat, but the Sand player is going to add 3 onto their dice roll because of these 3 deserts owned. However, a general and 2 soldiers versus 1 soldier on a naked tile, not favored for the Sand player here. And we've got a turn 3 battle. This is fairly uncommon. Before he attacks, he goes ahead and activates Handle with Gloves, and he forces all 3 other players at the table to throw away 2 advantage cards. And this is going to enhance the chances of him winning this early battle against this 1 soldier, just in case the Sand player's got any combat advantage cards in his hand. He attacks the forest here. Once again, fairly favored for the Poison player here. He's got numbers. He's got 3 soldiers and a general versus 1 soldier on a naked tile. He rolls a 4 for both his general and his soldiers here, which means his soldiers are actually rolling a 5, and even that alone is going to defeat anything that the Sand player could roll here. So, the Poison player, with a successful initial campaign here, takes that forest back, alleviating the pressure that the Sand Nation is putting on him. And so the Poison Nation is actually going to acquire land where if he didn't have those resources, if that 5 food was subtracted from the Poison Nation, wouldn't have been able to purchase the soldiers, wouldn't have been able to swing over a defensive fortification. Sand player, mistake. So we go to the Earth player. Myself, sitting at 5 and 17. Really wanted to buy the Rainforest here, but because of that advantage card, I cannot do so. I draw the announced card, Mercenaries, but not for you. And this is absolutely the most optimal time. This is going to give 3 soldiers to a nation that is not me. I don't want to give it to the Lightning Nation, as, you know, they could be on my borders at a moment's notice. I don't really want to supplement the battles going on over here. I want them to waste and throw resource at each other. But the beauty of the timing of this card is that the plague is happening this turn. Any soldiers I give to a nation, they're going to die, in all likelihood. So I don't want to give it to the Poison Nation because those soldiers are going to stick around. So I think the obvious choice, despite the fact that the Sand player has taken food away from me, I'll give him some free soldiers.
But not for long.
So the 3 free soldiers are going to go to the Sand Nation here. Forced to purchase the sealed, even though it's not what I want to do. But because I lost those resources, I go to 0 and 15. I've got a plethora of building materials and 0 food to work with. But here's what the Earth Nation can do. They can essentially extend their borders and continuously fortify those extended borders. Because my defensive fortifications are cheaper, they only cost 2 building materials apiece. I can just essentially blossom out, fortifying every single tile that I purchase. And I go ahead and construct the first 2 defensive fortifications of this game, putting me to 0 and 11. Lightning gets the forced gamble here. 2 players are going to roll a dice. The winner gets to pluck 5 resources from the loser, or remove one of their advantage cards. They do not get to keep this advantage card, they simply remove it. But all advantage cards were just thrown away by everyone except for the Poison Nation. So let's see who he chooses here. He does opt for Chandler and Zach, the Sand and Poison players. He wants to continue egging on that combat here and force it in someone's direction. Sand rolls a 2. Poison rolls a 6 with no advantage cards removed from the Sand player. Poison is forced to gain the single building material that Sand had. A largely non-consequential event for the Sand player here. Poison gets a small benefit here. He does say he wants it to be a non-confrontational event, so he didn't want to throw me into the mix to potentially make an enemy, I suppose, by those words. He wanted to force it on the 2 players who were already beefing with one another. Moves to the lake here, once again supplementing his food, and now that we don't have the Winter is Coming weather event here, this is going to be a lot of food going to Lightning's pockets this turn. So he goes to 0 and 9 here. Goes ahead and puts another resource building on his 3rd lake tile. So all 4 tiles that he owns, he's got a building on all of them. And we talked about this in the last recorded game, in which this isn't always the best thing to do because you are paying for that building material upkeep each turn after this. So he definitely wants to prioritize going for this mountain or this rainforest in the next turn or 2. If possible, purchase them both next turn, but I don't know if it'll be possible for him. He's generating a lot of food. So he's pretty much said, I'm going to be buying soldiers. You don't care about all that other stuff. That's great. Now it's time to put your money where your mouth is and buy a lot of soldiers in this next turn here. We see our updated resource totals here. 9 and 8 for Sand, 7 and 13 for Poison, 7 and 19 for Earth, 14 and 10 for Lightning. Very, very healthy for Lightning here. Lots of food and a good amount of building materials because he wasn't paying for those for all of those buildings just yet. So still a good amount of building material production there and a great amount of food production there. And this was a mistake in the video, or a mistake in our game that we played. The Continental Drift weather card actually was 2 turns, so the Plague card should not have been drawn until the following turn. And so this was a mistake on our part, but no one caught it, not even myself. So we did go ahead and draw the Plague weather event that forced the Earth, Lightning, and Sand players to roll a dice. Remember that this Plague weather event was instigated by the man-made Plague card of the Poison player. And he's immune to these effects, so his soldiers aren't dying. But this is a costly mistake. Once again, didn't recognize it until going over this footage here. Sand actually would have been able to hold on to these soldiers for at least 1 turn and potentially do something with them. I don't know if this is an attack that he wants, because because he has no offensive bonuses, and remember, the poison still has his advantage cards here, so we'll never know, but it is a mistake nonetheless. Potentially, it's a change that we make to the man-made play card anyway, in which we force it to happen that following turn anyway. So, I don't have any soldiers as the Earth player, so I don't even need to roll a dice. I've only utilized my general thus far in this game. Lightning and Sand are going to roll a dice, and let's see how many soldiers they lose. Lightning only has one soldier thus far, so he's going to lose it regardless. Sand does roll a 6, so if he had 12 soldiers, he would lose all 12 of them. Pretty costly in the long run here, and all of Sand's presence over here, he's just got a bunch of naked tiles. The great news is, though, is that Sand goes before Poison, so he can get some regiments out there to that desert tile, so that Poison can't just start streaking for their capital. And there we have it. Turns 1, 2, and 3, and the setup for this game. Comment below. Who's in the best position to win this game right now? Who is looking like the best contender here? We've got early aggression. We've got early positioning by the other players. What do you think?